Hello, big beautiful world. Well, today we're going up in the Caproni Vizzola C22J, designed by, is it Carmen Ferrarin and Mario Noriega, I think was the chief engineer on it. This is a lovely, lovely beastie. It's been around for a while. It's pretty stripped back. We'll head outside, I'll show you. Many of you will have seen this puppy around if you haven't got it already. It's cheap as chips and it's serious bang for the buck. You can see it's just a glider with a couple of effectively mini jets coming off it. Don't even know where the intakes are on this beastie. But there you go, sits low to the ground, seats two. It's a glider. I think what's really fascinating, and today is being Anzac Day, I've got a couple of, I want to bring up a few symbolic things. It's a fairly long flight, so let's get up into the air before I rabbit on for too much longer. What else we got? Clam. What else have we got? Chuck some boost on. Oh, might get some batteries. That'd help surely. We're good for fuel. Shove some boost on. No, not there, you goofy kid. There we go. Don't think we'll need that, will we? It's alright, we've got it on anyway. It's sitting there. Don't really need to squawk up or anything like that transponder. Don't need the pitot might become an issue. It's alright. Probably crash long before then. Right, so we've got I'll just open this. The sounds on this thing is still really, really cool. And I'm not sure what the jets are on it, but they sound great. Right, I'll shut that again. This, like all the others, is just going to be a bit of a kind of geek fest. So if you're after reviews and stuff, I'm not really that kind of guy. I'm just, I just like getting up there and rabbiting on about aircraft and flight and rock and roll and whatever else can come off the top of my head. Hopefully Track IR is behaving itself now. It's been giving me stick all day. I think we're good. Periodically you've got to make adjustments through the advanced settings. I might clip Tom, who's on his little reverse Segway here. Might have to take him out with the edge of the wing on this. As you see, it's a glider. Won't do all the checks. All the T's and P's look to be coming up nicely. Let's continue, shall we? Come on, my darling, you can do it. Watch out, Tom. Bonk. Come on, kid. Come on, Baba. Alright, swing around to the left and then around to the right. Avoid the van that has come to take me away, haha. Pretty much a hard ride, I think, for sure. We just keep swinging around to the right. We'll get along G Golf 2, see what's there waiting for us. This should take us straight onto the airport. I think it's going to give us the southbound, but we're going to swing around. We're going to do a right-hand run up along the bay. Oh, where are we? We are in Moorabbin. We are at Moorabbin Airport in sunny Melbourne. Okay. We're good. No warning signs, nothing to freak out about. No incoming. We're good. Gently give her a bit of stick to get her up in the air. 170, alright. Yeah, this is good. Alright, undercarriage up. Hang till we hit 1,000. So Moorabbin. The reason we're starting there is because Moorabbin was where... Okay, so like I said, this is going to be a really, really geeky flight. So you have been warned. If you haven't watched any of the other videos, you get a feel for the kind of nonsense and bollocks I come out with. But this one probably more so, today being Anzac Day, and like I said in the previous one, I'm not much given to nationalism of any kind. It doesn't interest me. But the pioneers of aviation on the other hand, and the pioneers of a lot of things, fascinate me. So, what pioneer are we talking about? Well, Moorabbin also has the name of Moorabbin Harry Hawker Airport or Airfield. And Harry Hawker was an outstanding young individual who was born just around here on the south side of Moorabbin, and back around the 1880s, late 1880s. And he went on to achieve fame. He around the age of 20 or so. So we're heading out to a place called Diggers Rest now, northwest of Melbourne, northwest even of the airport. And Diggers Rest, as it is now, is a kind of sleepy little suburb. Once in a while it gets into a bit of mischief because there's, I think there's bikie gangs out there who tend to give them a bit of grief, and a bit of the usual crappy culture that often hangs around the periphery of a lot of suburbs where there's not a lot of infrastructure available, you know, where times are often tough. So it's a bit of a tough suburb as I understand it, but, you know, Melbourne is a pretty place and a remarkable place actually. And as you can see ahead of you, that's Melbourne Central we're looking at right there. So along the eastern side here, we're looking at Brighton and a bit of a millionaire's row, you know, these beachside places, up to Port Melbourne, St Kilda, where I'm looking straight ahead now, Port Melbourne there, where the Spirit of Tasmania comes in to take you off to Tassie. It's a great part of the world. Lived over here for quite a few years, and it's a great joy. One of the cool things about Melbourne as a musician is the amount of bands and the pubs still with free bands that you can go see, or, you know, cheap as chips to go see. A lot of outstanding music out of this town. Always has been, probably always will be. I'm hoping always will be. But these are all the beaches along here, from Sandringham right up to Port Melbourne, right round to Altona and Williamstown over the other side there. I love flying this little sucker, and we'll talk about the aircraft, or I'll make shit up about the aircraft as we go, just as I'm making shit up about every other aspect of this flight and all the others. But it's a super cool plane to get around in. I haven't got any flaps or anything. Please tell me I haven't got any flaps. Correct. All good. So I want to get it, but I don't really... I'll try and keep the trim down. I shall try and keep the trim down so we're running at about 3,000. And I know I'll violate that. I'll probably end up at around 8 to 10,000. This little sucker is just so much fun to fly about in. It easily takes on a life of its own. I go, oh yeah, I was supposed to be monitoring my flight. I don't want to set the AP or anything on it. I don't even know if it's got autopilot on it. And frankly, between you, me, and the proverbial gatepost people, I don't care. I just don't care. So I'm just going to keep an eye on the VS, the vertical speed, and hopefully keep it between 3 and 5, especially as we fly over Tullamarine, follow that out to Diggers Rest and Sunbury. So this is Melbourne Central. That's the Kilds, St Kilda. Very lively part of Melbourne. And back in the 30s, it was like Sydney's King's Cross. St Kilda was associated with, you know, the whole gang wars and all that stuff. But it's a lovely I won't say sedate, but it's a great suburb now. It's just lovely. Below us, if I tip her over a bit, you've got Balti Bridge coming up on our 10 right there, and over out there at about, actually, can you see clear? Yeah, okay, so that'll be it there. Off at an angle, and we'll see it better as we come past it. That's the, oh, there it is. Yeah, you can see it clearly. So I'll see if I can zoom in a bit. See it? Westgate Bridge. All there. Very little activity today because Microsoft Flight Sim turns all of our major metropolises into ghost towns. Good on you, MSFS2020. Okay, so where were we? We're heading out to Tala. We're in the Caproni Vizzola. Okay, so, and we're flying out to a place called Digger's Rest, which brings me back to Harry Hawker. So, around the age of 20, he came up from Moorabbin. So when he was 20, it would have been about 1908, 1909. And he happened to see one of the first aircraft ever to come into Australia. Land out here at Diggers Reach, and I think it did a bit of barnstorming, which is pretty remarkable, you know, for the day. But because we're heading out over Tullamarine, we're probably going to fly smack dab into half a dozen aircraft. But he saw an aircraft, and of course it was love at first sight, as it is with so many of us. And he thought, I'm going to have me some of that. And a couple of years after that, he went off to England to seek his fame and fortune with the burgeoning aircraft scene over there. This is all prior to the outbreak of the Second World War. So that's Essendon Airfield down there, I believe. I don't think that'll be Tulla. I'm reasonably sure that's Essendon. I should know this stuff, but I don't, peeps. What can I say? I'm not a great host. I'm not a great, you know, what the heck are you doing watching this, people? Alright, now that we've got the self-esteem issues out of the road, so he went over to England and he wanted himself a slice of the aircrafting. So he got a gig with an outstanding young individual named Thomas Sopwith. See where I'm going with all of this, peeps? He worked with Tom Sopwith and he partook in many of the designs and eventually became his chief test pilot as well. So throughout the early war years, right through the First World War, I think, or at least into 1917. And I think he had a hand in designing the famous the Sopwith triplane, which in and of itself, historians kind of don't have many kind words to say about it. There we go, there's Tulla coming up now. That's the famous Tullamarine Airport. I shouldn't say famous. I mean, most of you guys watching this probably live all around the world and you're thinking, what are you banging on about famous? Flying lie? Shut up. So anyway, yeah, so Harry Hawker, this young kid from Moorabbin, goes over to England, helps design a number of aircraft, including the Tripe and the Salamander, and I do believe he helped plan out the Wallaby, which was built after the war. Well, hey, like I said, I'm coming into the flight path now. So that's the run of that. Okay, so this will be Digger's Rest over here in the brown patch. Now, you're thinking Harry Hawker, and you would be right, because after Sopwith went under or was purchased, I forget who purchased it, after the early 20s, about the time it went insolvent, Harry got out of the game, and in fact, well before then, I think he'd moved on. Towards the end of the First World War, he'd moved on. I don't want the speed to get down. On the other hand, I don't want the aircraft to go too high. So we're going to say, here we go, this little patch coming up, I think. We're going to say this is Digger's Rest up here. In fact, that might be Digger's Rest coming over here. Let's have a look. I have a feeling it is because you've got the train line running through it from memory. I bought a bass guitar off a cat up here years and years and years ago. So I'm pretty sure this is Digger's Rest Off. Let's revert to the magic map. Three, two, one, in your own good time. Thank you. Thank you. Come on, load it in, load it in, load it. There we go. Oh yeah, bang on track. So it is Digger's Rest. Perfect. Yeah, so this is where the first aircraft burtled about, or one of the first aircraft anyway. And it was at this point that young Harry Hawker, his life was fully, you know, he had an aeronautical epiphany, as people are wont to do. So, with the insolvency of Sopwith, or the impending insolvency of Sopwith, he struck out on his own. He had the goodwill from Tom Sopwith and Co. And he's still quite a young man. He was, I think, maybe in his late 20s by this stage. And he went on, what's my whiskey looking like, peeps? You know what? We'll bring her round. We'll bring her over north again. That should be perfect. All right, and leave that sucker behind. Struck off on his own, and he created a company poetically entitled Hawker Aircraft. And that's where the penny drops, if it hadn't already. Now, you might think that he had an active hand. He might have employed Sidney Cam by this stage, who went on to design and build the famous Hurricane, the unsung hero of the Battle of Britain. But as it stood back then, he had some fledgling ideas about what he wanted to do, but he'd no sooner formed the aircraft than he died. You know, a Newport Goshawk, or I think they got bought out by Gloucester. But yeah, the Goshawk, one of the early trainers, he was only in his early 30s when he died, Harry Hawker. But, you know, that such is the legacy that his company would go on to effectively change the course of world history by claiming victory in the Battle of Britain. And it really was the Hurricane's battle. The Spitfire gets all the shining glory, and this, everyone always trots this out when they talk about the Battle of Britain, don't they? Lay historians, you know, aero fanatics of all kinds. Yeah, no, it really was the Hawker Hurricane that won the day, not the show pony, the Spitfire. And there is truth in it, though. You know, the Hurricane was there, and to listen to a lot of people bang on about it, you would think that the Hurricane was like profoundly slow, like the speed of a biplane. In fact, I think it was no more than 50, maybe 60 miles slower than an ME-109, so it wasn't too far behind. It was a really solid aircraft, and it could take a beating. It could, you know, the early canvas, fabric covered winged ones, right through to the Mark, I want to say Mark 2A onwards, that had the, you know, the metal wings and metal fuselage. But yeah, so Hawker Typhoon, Hawker Hurricane, Hawker Tempest, Hawker Henley, a lot of aircraft were built from Harry Hawker's legacy. And so that's our Harry Hawker story, the kid from Moorabbin. Now, depending on which way we go, and again, I can fly it hard and loose. I just don't want to run much higher than... yeah, it's cool. Cool, perfect. Alright, so this sucker, let's go outside for a moment to have another squeeze, because this does look great. It's a cool looking beastie. Alright, that's enough of that nonsense. Yeah, okay. So goodbye Melbourne, and now we're making our way up to Albury. Albury, well, as we know it now, Albury Wodonga. It's a twin city, like if you're from the States, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm not sure if anyone in England has it. If I can think of a single town in England that has that kind of dual relationship or twin city relationship. Albury, what's up there? We'll get to that. Let's talk about the plane a bit more. Caproni, I think this was the last one to have the title Caproni. Caproni, again, dates back to the First World War, pre-First World War with the CA-1. It was a beautiful, I think it started out as a twin-engine bomber and ultimately became a tri-motor that lasted right through to the CA-20s, I'm thinking. But the most famous exponent during the First World War, at least for my money, was the CA-3, the Caproni CA-3, which is an unusually boxy yet elegant twin boom bomber, quite a large aircraft for its time, and it didn't only function as a bomber, it served as a reconnaissance, transport, ambulance vehicle, torpedo bomber at one point. And you got to remember, in the First World War, the Italian front was a whole lot different to what was happening on the Western front, because the Italians were fighting the Central Powers, the Austro-Hungarian and German armies, up through the Alps, the northern Italian Alps into the Austrian Alps. And many aspects of that battle were utterly horrific, not the least of which is it was year-round snow for much of it. But add to that, the Central Powers had sneakily, or had the foresight, or used their time wisely with quite a bit of subterfuge to set up, put cannon or artillery emplacements in the rock faces of the cliffs that would often overlook large tracts of the valleys. So these Caproni pilots had to fly over, and their little Ansaldo pilots, and all, they were working at about 5,000-6,000 feet as a constant, so they're substantially higher than a lot of the for the most part, substantially higher than a lot of dogfighting that emerged on the Western Front, or even up between the short, or the, not, I shouldn't say short-lived, the Russians fought for the first 3 years, didn't they? I think so. 3 of the 4 years the Russians did commit troops, but and they had the little Sikorsky S-16 and little aircraft like that. But the Caproni was a pretty amazing aircraft, robust as hell. A number of things that the Caproni CA-3 did was, it was the first to try a rather large bore cannon, and I think I couldn't tell you the bore off the top of my head. I'm sure it's substantially larger than a 20mm though. I know I'm always inclined to blurt this out with this simulator at least 5 or 6 times during every flight, but this is so cool. Tell me that's not cool. If you say that, you're no friend of mine. Log off now. Give up your relationship to me. But I love this puppy. I love the immersion of it. And this aircraft is seriously good value, this little Caproni Vizzola. So to come back to the CA-3 for a moment, Gianni Caproni was a massive pioneer. If you look at his backlog of work, or the Caproni Aircraft Company's backlog of work, and I think when they were trying out this large bore cannon, it was mounted on the front because it was a triplane, and they're all not tractors. They were it was a pusher aircraft, and I could be making this shit up. I don't know, as I usually do. But the cannon, when they had the recoil on it, it actually broke the framework right off the front, because it was a pod between these twin booms, and I think it broke the wooden or steel reinforced wooden framework with the recoil of this cannon. So the thing collapsed back in on the gunner type thing. But you just show how these magnificent men in their flying machines, these cats really were. There wasn't, even slide rules weren't used. They were kind of going, I think I've dreamed up a cool new aircraft. And they've gone ahead and tried. If you look at the CA-3, under again in the central gondola, pointing above the rear-facing central propeller, you've got a gunner who was like the DH-2 and other pusher aircraft of the early World War I period. He was he had webbing attached between his coat to this, what is fundamentally a bird cage, and he would have to stand there for the whole flight in this kind of exposed bird cage at 6,000 to 10,000 feet plus. They wouldn't have gone up as high as now. Well, maybe they did, but he really would have had trouble taking a lungful of decent air. So the poor bugger had to stand there for the whole duration of the flight, rugged up against this element. Absolutely not even a windshield to protect him. So imagine going up on a rainy day, let alone a snowy day, which was most days throughout the year. But the CA3 was great there, and the interbellum period as well. In fact, even by the end of the First World War, Gianni Caproni had some big ideas. He, like Claudius Dornier or Claude Dornier, he had some wild schemes. He had an aircraft, and this is Caproni again. He had an idea for a night. Oh, there we go. So track IR might be playing up plan. So yeah, he had an idea. Gianni Caproni had an idea for a 9-winged aircraft, the Noviplano, and it's this big 3 wings at the front, 3 wings in the center, 3 wings at the rear, and this massive fuselage slung beneath it all that was opulent as hell. Absolutely no expense spared, like the Titanic. And like the Titanic, it failed on its maiden flight. It just pretty much broke up not long, even as it was taking off, if I recall right. It shows up in all the great failures of aviation footage and Keystone Cop movies and stuff like that. But he had many successes as well. He was ahead of the curve with things like the Caproni. I'm not sure what the model was, but that was the first Italian jet. Would have been about 1940, 41. Again, not great performance, but arguably Gloucester E3, the Whittle, wasn't singularly great performance either. Yet in short order it gave birth to the Gloucester Meteor and the de Havilland Vampire and Venom and the Goblin engine, the Rolls-Royce Goblin, and so the Neen and other great aircraft engines and aircraft besides. So see, I told you we'd get up to 8,000. Not even thinking about it, mate. Not even thinking about it. So I'll try and get us in a gentle glide down. And also I should check where we are again, shouldn't I, really? Okay, so I drifted off course a bit, ladies and gentlemen. Not too much, that's all right. And there is a ton of activity. So we'll bring her over a bit more east. And we'll lock her back in on track. And like I said, this is all VFR. I can't be asked setting up AP. I can't be asked even doing any DME work or anything like that. It's just fly and prattle on. So if you're still with me, thank you. Thanks for putting up with this old madman. I shall try to remain within the limits of what I call entertainment or amusing or whatever. Failing dismally for the most part, I believe all along, by the world standards. But again, not doing it for the world, are we, ladies and gentlemen? No. We're doing it. It's an act of selfish love, this whole flight simulator crap, nonsense, bollocks, whimsy. So yeah, Caproni, again, Gianni Caproni himself had a hand in many amazing aircraft. There was that jet. There was the Steeple, which had that big kind of a bizarre looking thing, a tiny little cockpit area atop this, what is fundamentally a barrel with stubby little wings. I'm pretty sure it was called the Steeper, Steeper. A bizarre looking little beastie. It flew, and it was to test, I think, horizontal annular behavior. Because in the States, I think it was Lee Richard who was mucking around with annular winged aircraft, and that would later translate into, come on kid, get your act together. That would later translate into, the Sachs, the German S6 Sachs, which was a flying disc, or the fliegende Bierdeckel, as they called it, flying beer mat. Fred Zimmerman, oh not Fred Zimmerman, Zimmerman, I forget his Christian name, was doing the same with the V176 that Vought would later pick up, Vought Sikorsky would later pick up on and create the XF5U1 flying pancake. Who else was doing it? Flying pancake layout. Yeah, there was Zimmerman, Sachs, and Voigt were all doing it, or Vogt were all doing it. But back to the Caproni stuff, he had the Steeper, this big bulbous beer barrel with stubby little wings, and he also had a run of truly elegant twin engined aircraft and tri-motors as well. And I must admit, I've always been a sucker, not just for seaplanes, as I've banged on about in other videos, but Italian seaplanes. That's right. Yeah. So Caproni, the interbellum years, the interwar years, were responsible for a great deal of truly graceful aircraft. The seaplanes amongst them, can't think of any off the top of my head. The Cant Company came up with quite a few doozies, like the Eroni, which was beautiful. Imam Meridionali, I want to say, the Row 43 or the Row 48. Again, I could be making that stuff up, but truly gorgeous designs. Twin bay biplane seaplanes and all of that great stuff. But Caproni too had Gianni Caproni's company had a great number of beautiful aircraft throughout the war, like the twin engine 310 series, Basilieri series. So yeah, this is the last to carry the name, I think, of Caproni, and they were seriously, again, lovers of flying aircraft the world over and lovers of history, love paying out on the Italians. But Gianni Caproni and Fiat, arguably if they had better engines than the Assotta Frascinis and a lot of the underdeveloped Fiat engines that they had, their aircraft might have ended up in a very different realm, and I'm grateful, as I said in previous videos, that isn't the case. I mean, living under Il Duce or any of those freaking idiots would not have been what I call my idea of fun. But nonetheless, it doesn't detract from the fact that they came up with beautiful, beautiful aircraft. So yeah, this is the last to carry it. I don't even know in truth if Mario Noriega was called in as a contractor to the Caproni Vizzola crew, or if he worked with them for many years. But like I said, the lines on this puppy are really good. In fact, I dread landing it, because I remember when I first got it 6 or 7 months ago, I just had hell's on time trying to get the damn thing on the ground. Finding a landing speed that was an over the fence speed, then cutting to landing that could get it on the ground nice and easily. And also because it's a little bit freaky, even in the simulator, it's a little bit freaky to land this puppy because it is so small and close to the ground. So that's that, clan. We've covered off Harry Hawker. We've covered off oh man, I'm really going hard now. So covered off Gianni Caproni, and we're not even halfway there. So unless I can find some interesting bollocks to come out with, I'll probably cut much closer to Albury. But other than that, you've heard me say all this before. I love flying over this. This is Victoria, the state where I live, and it's really, it's what I equate to the Shire in Lord of the Rings. It's really pretty, and it's much more than that. This is where we're flying now. It's the start of the southern bushranger territory. So I don't think Ned Kelly ever ranged this far south, but famous highwaymen and bushrangers lived where this highway, or technically I think that's a Hume freeway down there. And the most famous place, of course, is Glen Rowan, where Ned Kelly's final stand took place and where they captured him and killed the rest of the gang. I think Ned was the only one to survive. But this is a cool flight up. This is a really good flight. I still want to come down, but I don't want to fly through the clouds because pretty as they are, they can annoy the hell out of me. So we're just going to hang on the edge of the clouds like what one aviator might have done. You know, where they'd often use the clouds just to save their bacon. They try and stay close to the clouds and then duck in if they felt that any of the flying circuses had a bead on them, or any of the Ugged Stuffles or whatever had a bead on them. But it is amazing how effective that, and it's true, especially obviously in VR with the Quest 2 or the Pimax or whatever your weapon of choice is for the VR units. But this with the track IR setup is, even though it's only effectively 2D, I still love it. I go into VR once in a while, but I'm more than satisfied just flying like this. I just find it incredibly satisfying. The truth of it is, maybe I'm just easily amused. That's really the long and the short of it. I'm a creature of poor taste who's easily amused. But if you're watching this, I figure you might be in a similar boat. So welcome one, welcome all. So if you like the usual nonsense, I'll get that out of the road now. If you're digging these videos, please put a like or a comment down against it, because look, everybody likes the virtue signal, and again, you can be at work tomorrow or whenever you get back to work, you can be in the office at the water cooler and you can say, there's this cat who makes really freaking weird kind of go nowhere videos up on YouTube with a stupid flight simulator, and I find myself strangely compelled to the nonsense that he comes out with. And I tell you what, you'll make more friends in the office before you've even poured that coffee than you will over the course of the next 12 months of working closely with them. So hit like and subscribe and leave a comment. One thing I'm interested in, and I sort of touched upon it in the first couple of videos I did. If you know anyone out there who gives aircraft design, like SDK design tutorials or whatever for flight sim, it's predominantly aircraft, because my relationship to add-on like payware scenery is up and down with the rate at which Asobo and Microsoft are doing the great photogrammetric updates, photogrammetry scenery and the like. I feel less inclined. I still do it occasionally, buy payware scenery, but I'll often think about it. Whereas with payware aircraft, I buy it without often thinking about it, like, or I might delay the gratification for a week or two, in as much as things like the Urco Air Coupe and stuff like that. In case you hadn't gathered, I'm a real sucker for the first 30 years of aviation. We'll say the Wright Flyer up to, I don't know, the appearance of the Century jets in the 50s. So that first 45 years of aviation, where you went from a hop, skip and a jump at Kill Devil Hill through to A4 rockets, or Messerschmitt 163 Comets, or Junkers 263s, which took over from that, or the early was it the I-153 MiG and Sabre, the MiG-15, so on and so forth. But the Brabazon, the Bristol Brabazon, that's another thing as well. Oh yeah, that's right, we're going to get onto the third part of the story, don't we? Oh God, I'm a lousy host. Hang on, I'll check where we are. Still a million miles off? Yeah, we are. Okay, so south of the lake. Oh, well, not too far off. Well, okay, Struth. All right, so I've got to talk about why we're going to Albury. Albury specifically. We're going to Albury because back in the late 1800s, around 1897, 1898, a young cat was born, and his name was Edgar Percival. And like Hawker, I think you know where I'm going with this. So Edgar was born here in Albury, and as a young boy, his parents then moved up to Sydney, what was then a sleepy little town outside Sydney called Richmond. It's where the RAAF, Royal Australian Air Force, has their main base now, or one of their main bases, certainly their largest base, I think, in New South Wales, or maybe I'm making that shit up as well. But I just bring her over. So they took him up to Richmond to live, and he grew up there. And there's a kind of weird thing that I really like about this guy, Edgar Percival. So just to spoiler alert, I'll get it out of the road now. He designed many and built many famous aircraft, or not famous, but great aircraft in the lead up to the Second World War and throughout the Second World War. None of them were fighters. None of them carried the glamour of major players. But nonetheless, you look at the Percival Gull from 1932-33 and tell me it's not a cool looking aircraft. Tell me it's not an amazing... I think there's the Percival Vega, the Percival Proctor, a run of trainers throughout the Second World War. I think some light transports. The Percival, after the Second World War, the Percival Pembroke, or it was Huntington merged with Percival to create the Pembroke and some other things. And I think one of their very last designs was even a jet-tipped helicopter. If any of you cats have stayed with me this far and you're into the weird and wacky stuff, you'll know all about the Fairey Rotodyne, which was Fairey's attempt to create it was, instead of just a standard rotors from a central engine, it ported jet emission, or it egressed out through these tips at the end of each rotor to regulate the rotor speed and so on and so forth. And the Fairey Rotodyne got built, and I think it was BOAC that was going to pick up on it, but it was canned because of change of British government and so on. This is the early 60s, I think, in Britain. Well, Pembroke were trying to do this. Edgar Percival's crew was trying to do this by about 55, 56. I think it was called the P-76, which for Australians has a whole different meaning in the form of a very historically notoriously unreliable car, the P-76 Leyland, which in fact was a very good car. There weren't as many recalls as people want to make out, but this P-76 had these rotor-tipped. It was a rotor-tipped helicopter. I believe only the one was built to put forward for commercial aviation, and nothing came from it. But Percival wasn't alone in that thinking. Like I said, Fairey did it with the Rotodyne, and that was going to be a commercial carrier, like a medium-range commercial carrier. We are looking for Lake Hume, if I'm not mistaken. And Fiat was doing it in the mid-50s. And I think both Sikorsky and Hiller over in the States were playing with similar ideas, but it never came to anything. They tried it. It was just too many moving parts. And that's cool. That's the way it goes. There you go. Okay, cool. So we should start thinking about a lineup soon, shouldn't we, gang? So that's Edgar Percival. He was, a pioneer. Unlike Harry Hawker, who died at the tender age of his early 30s, 32. Old Edgar lived to his late 80s. By then he'd become either, I think, an American citizen, but he might have also transferred over. There's lots in Wikipedia and elsewhere about him. There used to be a couple of great books when I was a kid. I haven't seen them in print for ages. So this is where I was going with the whole Anzac spirit. It's not just about the people who have sacrificed their lives. It's the people who created the technology that transformed not just the lives throughout the wars, but our lives in peacetime as well. Again, it's entirely, it may sound like a moot or an arguable point that the Hurricane was not as contributive as I'm making out here, but I beg to differ. You know, I played a substantially role with, not Keith Parks, who was Mary Cunningham, Air Vice Marshal Cunningham in the African campaign in the North African desert. His use of the Hurricane 2D was absolutely instrumental in stopping the Italian and Africa Corps in their tracks. You know, together with the scanned aircraft that he could put together, including Wackos and Fleets and old Bristol Bombays and stuff like that. So, and these are all the aircraft, of course, I'd love to see in Flight Simulator. Oh, that's what I wanted to mention as well before we hit ground. And again, I'd love to offer up heartfelt genuflection and apologies to each and every one of you for my rabbiting on, but also thanks for sticking the course, and I hope you're having fun. I know I am. A lot of people I've noticed over the past couple of years have said, why don't we get all these great World War II or World War I or these aircraft that can fire weaponry and guns? Why don't we get the great modern era jets, so on and so forth? And we know that Microsoft is coming out with the Top Gun series soon and all the rest of it, but a lot of you cats are probably a bit too young to remember when they released Flight Sim 95 back in, coincidentally, 1996. They realized they were onto a good thing with the use of geosat tiles. So even though the tiles might have nothing like it is today, where you've got like 3 meters to the pixel type thing or whatever it is, 1 meter, you know, ridiculous resolution now. Back then they ran on like these 25 kilometer square tiles that you soon got tired of them, but it was state of the art back then. And Microsoft and Bruce Artwick and his crew realized they were onto something, so they created CFS1 and CFS2, CF1 Combat Flight Simulator 1, based on that MS-95 model. And so you know, NWETO, Northwest Europe, the European Theatre of Operations, suddenly you could have a Thunderbolt, or you could have 21 versions of the Spitfire, or you could have the Mustang with the Malcolm Hood right through to the, you know, the P-51K, or you could have, you know, all these cool, famous Second World War aircraft, and you could go up against the ME-110s and the Heinkel 111s, and so on and so forth. Excuse me, please. And they did the same with the Pacific Theatre in short order. You know, you could take a Hellcat up against a Zero, or you could take a Dauntless and do bombing runs over Bougainville, or sink the Yamato. You know, you could do all of that. So where I'm going with all this is, I have a feeling, and look, I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that Hogg and the crew at Asobo are constantly scratching their chins saying, okay, how do we position ourselves to create a 2022 version of Combat Flight Simulator? And I wouldn't be surprised if it uses this engine, to be honest. I mean, obviously you're not going to have combat down here in sunny Victoria, but you could certainly have combat. You could do the Pacific Theatre, you could do the African campaign, you know, North African campaign, you could do them all. So I have a feeling they'd be discussing that. If not, I hope you're listening, Hogg and the Asobo crew. Oh shit, I'm well south, aren't I? That I'm sure a lot of people would offer you their hands in marriage if you created combat flight sims using this engine. It just makes sense, really, I think. IL-2, as brilliant as it is, it's a workhorse that's seen its day. Even when they extended to the likes of, you know, Cliffs of Dover or IL-2 1946 with the, that was actually 1946. They had a Focke-Wulf Triebflügel, the jet wing, and that was a paper plane from World War II from Focke-Wulf, from Heinrich Fokker, that had that kind of rotating thrust wingtip design. It's as well that it never got off the ground, because, you know, the thing would have been terrifying to fly in. But then, you know, Spab was doing that during World War One. They had a halfway through the fuselage, they had a propeller driven environment to free up the front gunner, so he'd have like the DH2, he'd have clear vision up front. Yeah, and I think IL-2 1946 also had the Heinkel Lerche, or the Vespa, maybe the Vespa, the Wasp, which was a similar, it had a kind of circulating annular ring at its base. Again, you just wouldn't want to fly it, but hats off to people for being that crazy, that batshit crazy to think of aircraft like that back then. So that's where I was going with the whole combat flight sim stuff. I have a feeling sooner or later they're going to get around and say, you know what, here it is, gang, you've been asking for it. Here's your combat flight sim with all the working guns, all the working bombs, all the digital cities you want to destroy, and so on and so forth. So Albury, oh yeah, well, we're still on the subject of Edgar Percival and the cool aircraft. Edgar studied, and so technically this should be a part two, a two-parter. It should be, you know, flying out of Moorabbin for Harry Hawker, and flying from Albury up to Sydney for Edgar Percival. The trouble is, I just wanted to do something that's about half an hour long. I might stretch out to an hour. To those of you who have had the patience to put up with the bollocks I've come out with throughout this period, thank you, thank you, thank you. The pain will be over soon. Give us another 10 minutes and we'll be done. But Edgar actually studied at a place called, and I think it was called the Technical College of Sydney back then. But when I was growing up, it was not only the UTS, which is the University of Technology Sydney. My brother did his trade there in the 1960s and early 1970s, as a wood turner by trade, working with wood. So that building, or that's runner buildings on Harris Street, are actually still there, where Edgar Percival studied at the turn of the last century. Also, it housed that building for many years when I was a boy. It housed the Museum of Science and Technology, which later became the Powerhouse Museum. It's now on the same street, Harris Street, Ultimo, up in Sydney. But when I was a kid, it had a replica of the Apollo 13 out the front that you could clamber all over. You couldn't go inside, obviously. Was it the Gemini capsule or the Apollo? It was one of the Apollos, I think. And inside was just, it was just an amazing experience. All cars cut in half. Did they have any aircraft? They had the cockpit of a Beaufighter, maybe, if I recall, or a Beaufort, DAP Beaufort, because they were built here under, a Bristol Beaufort built under license by the Australian Government Aircraft Company. So for the clever-eyed amongst you, you'll notice how the landscape has changed, but it's still mesmerising. It's just incredibly pretty up that way. I've got to stop saying it, just like I have to stop saying and ah. I have to stop saying, look how incredibly gorgeous this simulator is. It's like, show don't tell. I should just blather on about other shit while letting the scenery speak for itself. Like this cloud. That's a beautiful cloud, isn't it? I'm sure you all agree, ladies and gentlemen. That actually might be Lake Hume there. We'll soon find out, because there should be a dam towards this eastern end. And that'll be Albury, where we're going to bring her down. In which case, I have definitely screwed the pooch on this puppy, because you need a fair whack of leeway to get this critter down. As I said at the outset, it's a glide. If you haven't flown it and flight sim, go out and buy it. It is great fun. And there are many who say, yeah, the textures aren't up to snuff and the polygon count could be better. And they're all quite true. They're all far more exacting than myself, and they're quite right to be so. Many of them are qualified pilots, so it's important for that complete sense of immersion from their perspective to get that as accurate as possible. For myself, not so much. I'm just some guy, an illywhacker who makes up shit as he goes along, pretending he can fly aircraft in a simulated environment. So there's a vast difference. And I'm really just grateful to get down in one piece without the damn thing blowing up or blacking out on me. I didn't do any aerobatics. I didn't pull off any magic stunts. This aircraft is more than capable of it. I still have time to do it, but I won't. It's been a long flight. I won't waste any more of your time than I already have. I hope you have enjoyed it. I know I have. I shan't make the apologies too soon in case we're still a ways off. Incidentally, that northeast edge there, that northeastern arm you can see off at around our 9 o'clock, that's the Murray River. That you follow that along, you continue back along its source, and this will be the Murray as it extends along here, I believe. Continues on. So yeah, the Murray pours into it, coming down from Kosciuszko, way off yonder in a minor key, way over in the east, and it continues off west or northwest out of Lake Hume, past Albury, and over into up along the border, Mildura, Swan Hill, and then over into South Australia. And there's a great bush trip. I think I might have mentioned it in the last one. If I didn't, then I'm mentioning it now. If I did, sucked in, I'm mentioning it again. At some point I'll have to drop some the spoilers on this puppy. And it does, it's even got the spoilers from the old glider to help get it down. What are we looking at? I don't want to rise, don't want to bring her up. So I want to try and keep it down. A descent of around 100. Bring it around. Look at how bloody crusty it is on the New South Wales side. God, strike a line. What are you doing, New South Wales? So what are we looking like? 150, way too fast. Coming off the rudder a bit. So was I saying something? Did I finalise a thought or a sentence? That'd be a first, wouldn't it, ladies and gentlemen? I actually finished something I started out saying. However, I do try and remain consistent and bring the merry-go-round full tilt when I can. Get those spoilers happening, I think. There we go. That's it. Give ourselves some undercarriage. Down 100. Now if we can keep up with 100, because the jets, like I said at the outset as well, they take a while to spool. So you can't just chuck the throttle up and down like you can with a, well, not so much with a radial, but with an inline engine, for argument's sake. You kind of got to plan ahead with this puppy, and that's the joy of flying it. It's like, can I even land this sucker? And the proof, beautiful people of the world, will be upon us very, very shortly. Very shortly. All right. So, like I said, Albury Wodonga spans the border river, which is the Murray River, that signifies the border between Victoria and New South Wales, and that's now just south of us, or south of this airfield. But I do want to keep her up around 100. I'm not sure what the over the fence speed is, but I remember it starts to feel a little sluggish if I bring her in much under 100. So I'm doing about 90 now. And the trouble is, if I release the flaps, if I take the spoilers back up, it's suddenly you shoot off again. Huh? Come on, kid. We might be in luck. we might be in luck. Might even get it down on the center line if we're lucky. And we're down. We are down, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, well, let's get her off. Let's get the... thank you. No, seriously. The thanks are there. Okay, so we'll pull her off. Get her off the runway. Get her parked up and nestled. So this is the town in which young Edgar Percival was born. So there you go. We've covered off. What have we covered off? Did I touch? I didn't even touch on the Sunbury Rock Festival. Well, maybe I did. But we've covered off Moorabbin. We've covered off Harry Hawker. We've covered off jet-tipped propulsion in helicopters. We've covered off the works of Gianni Caproni, or a dodgy potted history. We've covered off the life and times of Edgar Percival. And we'll get this puppy in and we'll shut it down. And then I'll let you all get some well-earned rests. Can I put it down between it? Very unprofessional of me, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I'm just so unprofessional. All right, cool. So what do we got? We've got park and brake on. I think we can flip that puppy off. I think let's flip that puppy off. Off. What are we doing? Where's battery off? Battery. Here we go. Thanks for coming. All right, big beautiful world. It's been a blast as always. Thank you. Stay safe, stay sane wherever you are, and remain decidedly remarkable. See you later.